1854, London's epidemic claimed 10,739 lives. The 1854 Broad Street cholera outbreak in London ended after the physician John Snow identified a neighbourhood Broad Street pump as contaminated and convinced officials to remove its handle to prevent people from drawing water there. 39. His study proved contaminated water was the main agent spreading cholera. Although did not identify the contaminant. It would take many years for this message to be believed and fully acted upon. 40. In Spain, over 236,000 died of cholera in the epidemic of 1854-1855. 41. The disease reached South America in 1854 and 1855, with victims in Venezuela and Brazil. 30. During the third pandemic, residents of Tunisia, which had not been affected by the two previous pandemics, thought Europeans had brought the disease. They blamed the sanitation practices. Some United States scientists began to believe that cholera was somehow associated with African Americans, as the disease was prevalent in the South in areas of black populations. Current researchers note their populations were underserved in terms of sanitation infrastructure and healthcare, and they lived near the waterways by which travelers and ships carried the disease. 42. From the 10th of November, 1855, to December, 1856, the disease spread through Puerto Rico, claiming 25,820 victims. 43. Cemeteries were expanded to allow for the burial of victims of cholera. 44. In Arcebo, a large municipality of Puerto Rico, the number of people dying in the streets was so great that the city could not keep up. A man named Dulanda made it his responsibility to collect and carry the dead to the Provisional Cementerio de los Colericos. 45. 4. 1863-1875. The fourth cholera pandemic of the century began in the Ganges Delta of the Bengal region and traveled with Muslim pilgrims to Mecca. In its first year, the epidemic claimed 30,000 of 90,000 Mecca pilgrims. 46. Cholera spread throughout the Middle East and was carried to Russia, Europe, Africa and North America, in each case spreading from port cities and along inland waterways. The pandemic reached northern Africa in 1865 and spread to sub-Saharan Africa, killing 70,000 in Zanzibar in 1869-1870. 47. Cholera claimed 90,000 lives in Russia in 1866. 48. The epidemic of cholera that spread with the Austro-Prussian War, 1866, is estimated to have taken 165,000 lives in the Austrian Empire, including 30,000 each in Hungary and Belgium and 20,000 in the Netherlands. 49. Other deaths from cholera at the time included 115,000 in Germany, 90,000 in Russia, and 30,000 in Belgium. 50. In London in June 1866, a localized epidemic in the East End claimed 5,596 lives, just as the city was completing construction of its major sewage and water treatment systems. See London sewerage system. The East End section was not quite complete. 51. Epidemiologist William Farr identified the East London Water Company as the source of the contamination. Farr made use of prior work by John Snow and others pointing to contaminated drinking water as the likely cause of cholera in an 1854 outbreak. Quick action prevented further deaths. 18. In the same year, the use of contaminated canal water in local waterworks caused a minor outbreak at Ystadllythera in South Wales. Workers associated with the company and their families were most affected, and 119 died. In 1867, Italy lost 113,000 lives, and 80,000 died of the disease in Algeria. 47. Outbreaks in North America in the 1870s killed some 50,000 Americans as cholera spread from New Orleans to other ports along the Mississippi River and its tributaries. None of the cities had adequate sanitation systems, and cholera spread throughout the water supply and contact. 32, 52, 5th, 1881, 1896. 1892 cholera outbreak in Hamburg hospital ward. According to a J. Wall, the 1883-1887 part of the epidemic cost 250,000 lives in Europe and at least 50,000 in the Americas. Cholera claimed 267,890 lives in Russia. 1892, winking sad smiley 53, 120,000 in Spain. Winking sad smiley 54, 90,000 in Japan, and over 60,000 in Persia. 53, in Egypt cholera claimed more than 58,000 lives. The 1892 outbreak in Hamburg killed 8,600 people. Although the city government was generally held responsible for the virulence of the epidemic, it was not changed. This was the last serious European cholera outbreak as cities improved their sanitation and water systems. From the Russian Empire, cholera most likely spread to European countries. In Russia, cholera vibrio was found in Baku in 1892. The authorities of the city, despite the mortality of the population from cholera for a long time, did not recognize an outbreak of the epidemic. The residents of Baku left the city, including traveling to Astrakhan, a city located in the delta of the Volga River. After quarantine measures were introduced in Astrakhan, rumors spread among the population that living people were being put in coffins, sprinkled with lime, and buried in cholera hospitals. These rumors provoked riots. During the riots, medical workers were killed, the cholera hospital was burned down, and the infected were sent home. The incidence of the disease increased dramatically after the riots. From the 14th of June to the 20th of September, 1892, more than 3% of Astrakhan's population died of cholera, with 480 cases and 316 deaths per 10,000 inhabitants. This was the demographic maximum of the 1892 cholera epidemic. An estimate of excess mortality showed an increase of 278% in June and 555% in July over the same months in 1888-1894. Of all those admitted to Astrakhan hospitals, about 73% were workers living in hostels, shelters, about 5% were workers on ships, steamships, and barges, and 12% were artisans. The social composition by estates was as follows: 1983 peasants, 316 soldiers, 262 bourgeois, 12 Cossacks, 8 nobles and 5 clergymen. Natives of Astrakhan and province accounted for about 11% of the cases, 89% were seasonal migrants. Many children were orphaned due to the high mortality rate. Because cholera is characterized by waterborne transmission, cholera epidemics were observed in large cities along the Volga River. Much of the empire was infested with cholera vibrio. 55, 6, 1899, 1923. The sixth cholera pandemic, which was due to the classical strain of '01, had little effect in Western Europe because of advances in sanitation and public health. But major Russian cities and the Ottoman Empire particularly suffered a high rate of cholera deaths. More than 500,000 people died of cholera in Russia from 1900 to 1925, which was a time of extreme social disruption because of revolution and warfare. 56. The 1902-1904 cholera epidemic claimed 200,000 lives in the Philippines. 57, including their revolutionary hero and first Prime Minister Apolinario Mabini. Cholera broke out 27 times during the Hajj at Mecca from 19th century to 1930. 56. The sixth pandemic killed more than 800,000 in India. 12. The last outbreak of cholera in the United States was in 1910-1911, when the steamship Mold brought infected people from Naples to New York City. Vigilant health authorities isolated the infected in Quarantinian Swinburne Island. 11 people died, including a healthcare worker at the hospital on the island. 58, 59, 60. In 1913, the Romanian army, while invading Bulgaria during the Second Balkan War, suffered a cholera outbreak that resulted in 1,600 deaths. 61, 62, 63. During the outbreak, due to cholera frequently being spread by immigrants and tourists, the disease became associated with either outsiders or marginalized groups in societies. In Italy, some blamed Jews and Romani, while in British India numerous Anglo-Indians ascribed the spread of cholera to Hindu pilgrims, and in the United States many accused Filipino immigrants of introducing the disease. 64, 7, 1961 present. As of March 2022, the World Health Organization, WHO, continues to define this outbreak as a current pandemic, noting that cholera has become endemic in many countries. In 2017, WHO announced a global strategy aimed at this pandemic with the goal of reducing cholera deaths by 90% by 2030. 1. The seventh cholera pandemic began in Indonesia, called El Tor 65, after the strain, and reached East Pakistan, now Bangladesh, in 1963, India in 1964, and the Soviet Union in 1966. From South America, it spread into Italy by 1973. In the late 1970s, there were small outbreaks in Japan and in the South Pacific. There was an outbreak in Odessa in July 1970, and there were also many reports of a cholera outbreak near Baku in 1972, but information about it was suppressed in the Soviet Union. In 1970, a cholera outbreak struck the Samalka district of Istanbul, then an impoverished slum, claiming more than 50 lives. Because this incident was notorious, the district was renamed as Bayrampaşa. Also in August 1970, a few cases were reported in Jerusalem. Other outbreaks. Vibrio cholerae has shown to be a very potent pathogenic bacterium causing many pandemics and epidemics over the past 3 centuries. However, most outbreaks are known to be self-limiting, meaning they come to an end after peaking, without human intervention. One of the mechanisms significantly determining the course of epidemics is phage predation. 66. This process is strongly dependent on successful recognition of the bacteria by lytic phages, in which cell surface receptors play a crucial role. Bacteria can reduce their susceptibility by changing their surface receptors and preventing phage absorption. In the case of V. cholerae, the changed receptor gene expression is due to an alteration in cell density during its infection cycle, a process called quorum sensing, QS. The stool samples collected from patients contain clumps of bacterial cells, demonstrating the occurrence of cell-cell interaction in the latter stage of the infection cycle. QS is strongly regulated by 2 autoinducer molecules, AI2 and CAI1. 67. Evidently, these molecules will have a significant effect on the success of phage predation in V. cholerae infections. A previous study has unraveled the mode of action of autoinducers on preventing predation on the level of phage entry. 68. The study has shown that the aforementioned autoinducers downregulate the 10 biosynthetic genes of the surface O antigen, which is primarily used as a phage receptor for vibriophages. This mechanism results in an increased phage resistance. It can be stated that the loss of the ability to Produce the receptor, reduces the possibility of a phage-dependent limitation or even elimination of V. cholerae. This should be kept in mind when developing a treatment for enteric bacterial infections with phages as an intervention tool. Future approaches may include additional quorum regulators that operate as quorum quenchers to reduce quorum-mediated phage resistance. 1990s. Bodies of Rwandan refugees who died during the cholera epidemic, October 1994, January 1991, September 1994. Outbreak in South America apparently initiated when a Chinese ship discharged ballast water. Beginning in Peru, 16